Hello, this is Max Grossman with the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt, and today it is my honor to welcome Jim Murphy, who is our special guest, formerly employed by the City of El Paso. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
So glad to have you. So Jim reported to Tracey Jerome, who is now exiting the city. Tracey Jerome holds the title Senior Deputy City Manager. She is paid $232,375 per year plus benefits, the third highest paid employee in the city after the city manager and city attorney. And we have a lot to say about her, but first I want to introduce Jim and learn a little bit about his background and how he ended up working for the city, and just take us through the chronology of his employment. So where are you from, Jim?
I'm from Syracuse, New York.
Okay, and what brought you to El Paso?
I was in the first band that ever played at Chelsea Street Pub, if you remember that pub.
Because you're a musician.
I'm a musician. Back in the early 80s. And while we played there, I met one of the women working there, and she would become my future wife.
Oh.
And we got married in 1986 and moved up to Syracuse for 18 years.
Okay.
And while I was in Syracuse, I worked for my father in construction. We had a residential remodeling business. And in 1992, I started the New York State Blues Festival.
Oh.
I'd gone to Chicago in 1990, and a lot of my friends would go from Syracuse to Chicago, and I thought, well, we're halfway between the Far East Coast and Chicago, so maybe we could do something in Syracuse. There was already a jazz festival there. So I started the Blues Festival. And I learned through that, I learned how to write grants. I started it as a for-profit, not knowing any better. And then I realized if you were a nonprofit, you could apply for grants. So I learned to write grants through that little organization, still going on all these years later. And so that helped me. Then I got hired by the Arts Council, the Cultural Resources Council in Syracuse. And I started an Irish festival there that's still continuing too. So I brought those two events to the Cultural Resources Council. And then my wife decided she might want to come back to El Paso. So I applied for positions down here through my fundraising capabilities, and I got hired by El Paso Opera.
What year was that?
That was in 2004.
2004, so 20 years ago. That's
Right.
your first job with the city.
Not with the city, with El Paso Opera.
Oh, El Paso Opera, and that's a nonprofit?
That's a nonprofit.
Okay, go ahead.
I knew nothing about opera, never been to an opera, but I knew how to raise money.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons they hired. That's probably the only reason they hired me. And I was from New York, and I think that had something to do with it, right?
Right, and what's your educational background?
I didn't get any degrees until I moved to El Paso. I got my bachelor's from the State University of New York at that time online, and then I went on to get my master's to the University of Oklahoma.
Okay.
All online.
Good.
And so El Paso Opera, I was their manager, managing director. And so I started to raise money for them, and I went to the first organization I went to was the Community Foundation. The year before, they gave the opera $100. I went there, they gave us $3,500.
Okay.
So I began raising money and making personal contacts that I used right up through my whole career here in El Paso.
Okay, and from there you went to work for the city?
From there, I did a short stint at the animal rescue thing, and then I got hired by the city.
What year was that?
2006.
2006.
May of 2006.
So that was shortly after the city changed from a strong mayor to a city manager form of government. Joyce Wilson is
Right.
the city manager,
Mm-hmm.
and the city is moving in a completely different direction. A lot of restructuring, a lot of reorganizing in those years after that change. Just to bring our viewers up to speed, I want to talk for a moment about Tracey Jerome, and then we'll go through your city career. So Tracey Jerome studied art history and historic preservation. She'd spent 4 years working in a London art gallery, and then in 2015 was appointed by Tommy Gonzalez, our former city manager, to be the Director of Museum and Cultural Affairs, and she was then appointed Interim Director of 2 museums, the El Paso Museum of Art and the El Paso Museum of History. She had never worked in a museum. Zero museum experience, zero museum educational preparation. From there, she was eventually appointed to deputy city manager and then senior deputy city manager, rising to become the third highest paid employee in the city, $232,375. Her husband, David Jerome, who had worked at the Greater El Paso Chamber of Commerce, went off to Hollywood, California for less than a year to run their Chamber of Commerce, came back to El Paso, is now currently employed in the city as well. He's paid something like $150,000. He was tasked with managing some airport land, providing some consulting. I'm not 100% clear on exactly what he does. But in any case, Tracey is going off to greener pastures. She is going to begin a new job in Mooresville, North Carolina, population 53,000 people, as their town manager. I know for a fact, and everybody knows this, that she wanted to be city manager of El Paso, but that was not going to happen. And so she'll be leaving, and she starts her new position on April 29th. There has not been much said about Tracey Jerome in the media, very little in fact, just sound bites here and there. I think our media has done a generally poor job of informing the public of how our city really works, what the administration actually does. And I don't think that Tommy Gonzalez's policies and the activities of his deputy city managers have been studied properly, which is why we brought in Mr. Murphy. I'll call you Jim if that's okay. Mm-hmm. I'm Max. So that we can learn more about the inner workings of the upper administration and what it was like to work in particular for Tracey Jerome. So that's 2015. But Jim, you started working for the city in 2006, which is long before Tracey came on board. So let's talk about those years before Tracey Jerome.
Okay, I was hired, like I say, I went for an interview. The interview took place at the Museum of Art because the Museum of History building wasn't completed yet. They were still out east and moving things into the new facility. So my goal was to take care of membership and to fundraise, holding events at the museum and writing grants. Writing grants has been my specialty. And so that's what I began doing. And I never had, we had a good team over there. Barbara Angus was there for 20-some years. Cindy Kiefer was the secretary. Both of these moved from the east facility over to the new facility. Sebastian, he was the maintenance engineer. He moved over there as well. He was hired around the same time I was. And everything was rolling along nicely for many, many years.
Who was the director of the museum at that time?
Her name was Jennifer. I can't remember Jennifer's last name, unfortunately.
Okay.
But she was a young gal, and she had already been involved in museum studies and everything else, and she was a very good person.
So Jennifer is the director of the museum. She's the boss. And,
yes.
And who does she report to?
She reported to, I can't remember that young lady's name either. She was over there running MCAT at the time.
So there was at least another level of administration
yes.
before Joyce Wilson.
Yes.
Right. So you yourself are 3, 4, 5 levels below.
Right.
Our new city manager, Joyce Wilson. Okay. Take us forward chronologically.
So then our director moved on, and eventually she was replaced by Julia Bussinger, who was from the Ukraine or one of those countries over there. She was, I believe she was in the Olympics as a young woman.
I remember her.
Yeah. And she came, and things were running along smoothly. She wasn't the best communicator. She had broken English, and I think she, along the way, maybe have lightly offended some of the people that I'd been working on bringing money into the museum.
What year did she come on board?
Oh God, I don't know. Might have been. She was there for 7 years, so 2008. 9,
okay. Before Tommy Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
And so, we were doing our programming, and she actually brought a lot of programs into the museum, and things were rolling along good. And, like I say, my job was to raise money, and that's what I was doing. Any program that came up, anything that came up, I was writing grants all the time. I ended up writing over $13 million worth of grants for the city, and I brought in somewhere around $5 million.
That's a lot of money.
And that's a lot of money.
And I know the programming was generally high quality in those years. You had some interesting exhibitions.
Yeah. We did a great music exhibition that was called Rock and Roll El Paso or something like that. And we reached out to all the musicians here in town, and they had quite an exhibit there. That was one of the good ones. And I had raised money for La Vallita, I think it was called, the village. And it was, I went through the Institute of Museum and Library Services and raised $150,000 from them. It was a government agency. The city matched that with $176,000. And in the middle of that whole thing, I forget one of the city folks, Ortega or whatever his name was, I can't remember. But he said he didn't think I was going to get the grant, so he said, if you get this grant, we'll give you another $100,000.
Steve Ortega, city council rep?
Yeah.
Okay.
Might have been Steve. And so I got the grant, and then he was gone. So there was no one to confirm that. So I went through all my emails, and I found the email that he sent me and said that to me. So the city had to cough up another $100,000 for this program. So I felt pretty good about that.
That's good. That's good. You got what was coming to you. Okay. So Tommy Gonzalez was hired as the city's second city manager in June 2014, and he had a long tenure. He was fired on February 28th, 2023. Okay, so it's been a while, and now he, of course, is the city manager of Midland, Texas. But he was city manager for almost 9 years, which is a very long time. And of course, a lot of what he did was quite controversial. And that includes his management of our museums. So when Tommy became city manager in 2014, did you immediately feel a change, or did changes occur sometime after?
Afterward.
Okay. Tracey Jerome comes on board 1 year later in 2015, and as I stated, was appointed Director of Museum and Cultural Affairs and given charge of 2 museums, including your museum.
Right.
So when she came on board in 2015, what was that like?
It was normal, nothing out of the ordinary. You know, it was her and Ben Fife. Ben Fife was working under her, and he was our main contact, I'll say. You know, she wasn't our main person. We went through Ben.
Okay.
And everything was running as normal for the first couple of years or so, I'd say.
Okay.
And then they, if you don't mind me continuing,
Go ahead.
They went after Julia Bussinger. In the big picture, here's what I think happened. If you remember, Tommy Gonzalez came from Irvin, Texas, I think.
Right.
Well, he had restructured their, saved them a lot of money, supposedly, by restructuring their city employees over there. So what I think the plan was, I didn't realize this till after I was gone. She must have had directions from somebody. But her job ended up being dismantling the Museum of History. First, she got rid of Julia Bussinger.
Wait, hold on. Tracy Jerome's job became dismantling the Museum of History.
This is my opinion, getting rid of all of the city employees. We were all city employees.
How many?
There were 12 of us.
12 of you employed at the museum.
That's right.
Does that include from top to bottom?
Yeah.
Including janitorial, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
12 people. Go ahead.
All city employees. Then all of a sudden, the city employees started being released one by one and replaced with contract employees. So that saves the city money. And that's to me is what Tommy Gonzalez did. Maybe, I don't know. Not saying anything.
And contract employees are at will, or
they can let them go at any time.
They're at will, and their contracts are yearly?
Yes.
And they're paid much less?
I don't know about that. The man that was in charge of our facility, the maintenance man, he was given a raise if he became a contract employee.
Okay. Tell us about the casualties there. Were there some people who lost their jobs who had been there a long time?
Over time, yes. She went down the ladder. First, it was the director, and Julia Bussinger was a good leader, but she was beaten up in the process. And I mean, you could hear her shredding papers because they attacked her on everything that she did. All of a sudden, she could do nothing right, and I mean, it was brutal. She suffered mentally and physically, in my opinion. are relentless. Once they start on you, then there's no escaping it.
Let's talk more about that. So I met her. I found her to be competent, very colorful person, certainly committed to her job. So what does this treatment look like? She's being scrutinized more, of course, but was she abused verbally? Was she mistreated by her superiors?
Well, I'll speak on what happened to me, if you don't mind, because I don't really know what happened to Julia.
Okay, let's move from Julia to you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So after almost 12 years of writing grants and managing events, I did a little bit of everything during this 12 years. All of a sudden, I didn't know how to write grants according to her.
According to Tracey
Jerome. And I was no longer allowed to call anyone without permission first. I could not have lunch. Going to lunch with people and negotiating with people was what my job is.
Networking.
Yeah. So I was no longer allowed to go to lunch with anybody without permission. Every email I sent out, I had to send to Tracy and Ben. So nothing I could do anymore was right the way that they wanted it.
So just so we understand, what was the pecking order? Did you report to Tracey Jerome or to Ben Fife?
Well, it used to be Ben Fife, and all of a sudden Tracy, I had to run everything through Tracy.
Did she treat other employees the same way? She wanted to manage every single person's job?
It was one person at a time. They took apart Julia, and then they came after me, and then they went after Barbara Angus. She was the curator at the time, and then they went after the secretary, Cindy. She'd been there. These people had been there. Barbara had like 32 years in, and Cindy had 28 years in or something like that.
And they were let go of, or?
They were beat up like everybody else was.
Okay.
And
people have been there 20 or 30 years.
Yeah. I thought to myself, this is something, you're not going to get to me. I know what I can do, and I know what I've been doing, and you are not going to defeat me. One thing, I'm tougher than you. I can take this. You can give me anything you want to give me. I'm going to ride the train, and I'll do whatever you want me to do.
Mm-hmm. And you're of Irish extraction, right?
Yes, and you're not going to get rid of me. But they beat you up so badly, mentally. And you just can't take it anymore. Everything that you do is wrong. And you think that's not a big deal. But if that happens to you every minute of every day, then they hired David Grabitsky, the new director, right? This guy was an innocent guy from Utah.
I remember him.
He was a religious, peaceful, loving guy. He moves here. He was making $98,000. Brought his family here, his kids here, bought a house here, bought another car.
The new director. All excited for his job.
He had plans that were just great plans. But little did he know, his job was to get rid of all of us. This peaceful man.
Why would they hire him to get rid of you instead of Tracy or Ben getting rid of you?
Because they needed a director for the museum. He was hired. They got rid of Julia. They brought him in. And this was his ultimate goal. He didn't know that at the time, of course.
So he was hired to destroy the institution,
yes.
essentially.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to hire somebody.
Yeah.
Okay. And he was qualified.
He would cry. He cried a couple times at our meetings because he had to do what he was forced to do, and it just wasn't who he was. And so, when it came to me, we started having meetings. It would be him and me and Ben, and I thought I was going in there for one reason, and it ended up being another. And actually, there should have been a person from HR there. I don't think they should have been cornering me like this without someone from HR. And I found out later, I could have had someone from HR there had I known what this meeting was going to be about. So I would take a vacation, and they would send me. One time I took 3 days off, a Friday and a Monday and Tuesday. On Friday, I got an email from them saying I had to do this and this and this and this and this and this, and I had 5 days to do it. I'm like, well, I'm going to be gone for 3 days. I'm on vacation for 3 days. Let me have from Wednesday when I come back to the next Wednesday. Give me that 5 days. No. Thanksgiving comes along. Get a couple days off for Thanksgiving. I'm assigned more stuff to do over my Thanksgiving break. I said, well, I'm on break right now. This happened to me 3 times right in a row. Every time I took a day off, it was no, here's an assignment.
What was morale like? Just generally, what was morale like under Tracey Jerome?
Well, like I say, it started out fine, but once you start, everybody knows what's going on in the office. Like, who's next? That's what you don't know. But it was just a terrible, terrible time, no doubt about it.
Tell us about Tracey Jerome's professional demeanor. When you were actually called in to talk to her, when you had discourse with Tracey Jerome, what was that like? Was she polite to you? Did she treat you with respect?
Well, usually her and Ben, and they were quite the team. I would say she was polite in her own way. She was doing her job, and she didn't really, no feelings were involved, let's put it that way.
Heartless.
Heartless.
And what about Ben?
Ben was her puppet.
Yeah, he just says yes and takes orders.
Yeah.
Okay. What about programming? Museums seem to be well run up until Tommy Gonzalez. These changes are being made. Veteran employees are being let go of or being forced out in one way or another. Morale is down. You've got this very sort of severe management style. What about museum programming? How did that fare?
Well, I was given a certain date to create programming for 2018, I think it was. And so I created that, but it was, there was an event they wanted to have in December. Well, it was already November something. So, I created something on paper, and so it went to David Grabitsky, and then he had to move it on from there. So by the time he takes care of it and she looks at it, I'm blamed for not creating a December event. It was like, no, I gave you the plan. I laid everything out for you, but I need time. If you expect us to be sponsored, I can't make it happen overnight. So they would create deadlines that were impossible to meet. And then they would belittle you. I mean, I figured it out today. I took some papers with me, and when I left, I emailed myself some stuff. One thing I did do when I left everything intact. All my fundraising, all my grants, and everything else. I didn't destroy anything. The next person that came in and took my job, if there was a person after me, had everything that I ever did for that museum. I left everything intact. So I didn't, sabotage anything. But I took some papers with me just because they were correspondence between myself and Ben, or myself and Tracey, just so I'd have something when I went to the Equal Opportunity Employment Agency. I'd have something that said, look at this. And they didn't really care. I tried to find a lawyer because it was like, this is shameful. No lawyer will go against the city that I knew of. You know what I mean?
I've got a few.
I was just some little guy who knew nothing. I'm just.
Sorry we didn't meet earlier, Jim.
That's all these people, Barbara, myself, and everybody else. We're just people. We do go to our job every day, and that's what we do. We don't know when something happens. We don't know what to do. We don't know HR is supposed to be helping us. We don't know that. You go to HR. HR is not really helping you in the city because they're city employees. They're not going to stick up for you because their job's on the line too. They have to stick up for the city. They have to make sure that the city is getting rid of you properly.
Wow. So tell us about the end of your employment. You had been hired in 2006. You worked there for 12 years of your life. It's a long time.
Yeah.
And in 2018, you're done. How did that happen?
Well, I didn't get my full 12 years in. I was let go in the end of February, on March 2nd. And if I'd have gone through May, I would have gotten my full 12 years in. And if I'd have gone one more year, I would have been old enough to collect my full Social Security.
Okay, now hold on a second. Make us understand that. So if you had completed 12 years of employment, you would have been vested? Or how does that work?
No, I was already vested.
Okay.
But I wanted to finish through 12 years.
Okay.
Tracy says, what are you going to wait so long for? Why are you going to wait? In other words, go now.
She wanted you out.
She wanted me out.
This is March 2018.
My offer was, let me work through May, and they'll give me 12 years.
Why did you want 12 years? I'm sorry.
Well, why do 11 and a half?
You want to just finish your 12
I wanted
years?
to finish my 12 years.
Okay. All right.
But there was no going for that.
All right.
And so I got out March 2nd, and I was too young. I was born in September. Another year and a half, I would have been able to collect my full benefits from Social Security. But I'm telling you, and you can think to yourself, well, why don't you go get another job? And you don't know what it's like to be beat up. You're not going to go look for another job.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us how you were let go of. I mean, tell us about that dynamic. Were you fired? Did you resign? Were you forced to resign? Did you decide to resign? How'd that happen?
Well, it dawned on me that maybe I could, I had a retirement package. So I went over and checked with their, I'm a little lost my mind here for a minute. With, the city retirement place. I went over there to see what was going on. And they said, well, you can, yes, you have a retirement package. And you'll get X amount of dollars from now until forever.
Okay.
So I'm like, well, shit, I'll take it then.
Okay.
So it dawned on me all of a sudden. I didn't even think about it. Why would I think about it? I'm not ready to retire.
You had been paying into a pension.
Yes, there you go.
Okay.
And I just never thought about anything like that. And so all of a sudden one day I went over there and it was like, well, okay. So at least I have something.
Okay. And then you resigned.
I resigned.
Because you couldn't take it anymore.
It was either I could tell they were going to fire me. And if they fire me, I don't know what happens then. I mean, I don't know, am I still going to get my pension or am I going to lose my pension? So in my mind, it's like I'm going to beat the gun and retire.
And you were just the next one in line.
Yeah.
Among several employees.
They went through everybody in the museum except for that janitor.
When you left, did Tracey hold a going away party for you? I'm not being facetious.
No.
You'd worked there for 12 years.
No, man.
Nothing like that.
No. Well, another thing.
A polite goodbye, a thank you, anything?
That used to be funny. I thought it was funny. When you put your first 5 years in, you got a letter from the city manager. But they didn't sign it. They stamped it. And it was like, you guys could have signed this letter. I mean, I'm an employee. Take one split second and put your squibble on there. So then Tommy Gonzalez ends. I do my 10 years. Same thing. A stamped letter. It's like, come on.
He couldn't even find the wherewithal to sign his own letters.
I mean, how many of these do you have to sign a day? 10? Sign them. Don't have somebody stamp the damn thing. You don't even know anything about
Now
me.
let's talk a little bit about him. So Tommy is the city manager. How often did Tommy Gonzalez visit with the museum and hold meetings with all of you in order to brief you and keep you in touch with upper management?
Never.
Excuse me?
Never. Not only never.
Never.
I'll say this too, and I realize this. Instead of training me, let's say, okay, they've come up with my faults. These are your faults. Blah blah blah. Instead of saying, Mr. Murphy, you need training in this, and we're going to offer it to you. They don't do that. They just tell you what's wrong with you every day, and never offer you, any way to get better.
Okay, so Tracey is the deputy city manager and then the senior deputy city manager. She's in charge of the museum. My understanding is that the History Museum and Art Museum were separate institutions and that they were united under Tommy.
No, it was before Tommy.
It was before Tommy that happened?
Yeah.
Okay. And so they're sort of lumped together.
Yeah, the Museum and Cultural Affairs Department was created.
The Museum and Cultural Affairs Department was created. Okay.
That brought everybody together.
Did you talk to people at the art museum? Was there a similar process happening there as well?
I'm not sure about that. I know at one time I was sitting with Ben and, they were complaining about my grant writing. And I said, well, the city has a grant writing department. Let me work with them and they can teach me. I've already been doing it for 20 years, but they can teach me how to do it. And they said, no, that it doesn't work that way. And I'm like, okay. And then in the next statement, Ben says, they just got through working with helping the Museum of Art with their grants. And I'm like, well, they just got through working with the Museum of Art. Well, why can't they work with me?
Yeah. Did they, after you left, did they replace you?
I don't know.
Interesting. So Tommy Gonzalez did not visit the museum and talk to staff there. He didn't go there.
Not that I recall.
Your only contact with management was through Tracey.
Mhm.
How often did she hold meetings of her staff at the museum?
Well, Ben was the person who held the meetings.
Okay, Ben held the meetings without Tracey.
Right.
But did Tracey hold meetings that included you for the staff? Did she ever have meetings of all the employees, even once a year or quarterly?
We were called over to MCAD on occasion, and they would lay out something new that they were putting together. I remember PowerPoint presentations a couple of different times.
Wow, okay. So it's mostly Ben.
Yes.
Okay. And what kind of meetings would Ben Fife hold?
Oh, when we would have our weekly meetings, he would be running the weekly meetings because we were without a director for a while.
Okay.
So that's when he sat in.
And he'd come in with an agenda and he would say, okay, you're responsible for this, you're responsible for that.
He was late every time.
He was late every time?
He was late every time, I'd say.
Wow.
Maybe one or two times he showed up on time, but he was always a few minutes late. And, it's like, we're not that important for you to show up on time, but he would always be late.
That's interesting. And that was consistent over a period of years.
Well, over the time between directors.
Right. Okay. Got it. And the new director that you introduced us to, what was his name again?
David Grabitsky.
How long did he stick around?
He was there for maybe a year, if that.
And what happened?
Like I say, one time in the museum lobby downstairs, Tracey yelled at him in front of all of us. I forget what it was about, but she gave him the frickin' riot act right there in front of the staff. And that was not cool at all.
Was that the moment when she fired him, or that was just a moment?
He wasn't fired, he quit.
He quit.
Yeah.
Okay.
He couldn't take it. He called a meeting with us and he just said, this is not who I am.
Did he tell you why?
Well, everybody knew why.
Right. You couldn't stand working under Tracey Jerome.
Couldn't do it, man.
Okay.
This guy had big plans and
Was he replaced then with somebody else?
no, that's Ben took over. There was nobody at the museum. I don't even know if the Museum of Art today has a director. Do they? They've been without a director for years. You can't hire a Museum of Art director? I don't think there's a director over there now.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'd have to verify. Wow. And when you left in 2018, of the 12 employees at the Museum of History, how many were left?
I'd say there were probably still 7 to go, 6 or 7 to go.
Wow. Do you know what happened after you left?
No. Oh, I know Barbara was let go, and then Cindy was let go. I don't know anybody after that.
So from 7, you got down to what, 5?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That sounds like decimation.
Oh, it was. It was like everybody was gone.
Now, Tracey is, I'm just going to say it because I don't care. I don't work for her. You don't work for her either at this point, but she seems to me to be the most unqualified person to ever hold office in the upper administration of the city, because I'll tell you something, I have a PhD in art history. She had, an undergraduate degree, I think, in art history, historic preservation. Maybe she had an MA. But that doesn't qualify me to serve in the upper administration of a major American city and to help manage a budget of $1.3 billion. It just doesn't, okay? And it doesn't qualify me to earn $250,000 doing anything. So it makes me wonder how invested she was in these cultural institutions. Did you get a sense from Tracey Jerome that she cares about the history of El Paso and presenting that to the general public? Did she have a heart for it?
I can't say that for sure, but El Paso went through a period of time where, there were qualified people here in El Paso to run these museums, but they always seemed to hire someone from out of town or from another country. And, it was always a slap in the face in the underground conversation with all the museum people was, why can't we just hire someone locally who knows what this city's about?
Right.
But they would always hire from outside. The person running the Museum of History right now, luckily for her, and I'm sure she's qualified and a beautiful person, but she got that position because the guy who was running it was that guy from Russia or something who got caught, working with prostitutes and things.
Things happen.
Yeah. So she was handed that position, and good for her. I mean, finally somebody from El Paso is running one of the museums.
Wow. Yeah, I forgot about the Russian guy.
Yeah.
What is her name again? Do you remember? The current director?
No, I don't. I've never met her.
Escapes me as well, and I have not met her either. Wow. So, any other thoughts, Jim, about your time working under Tracey Jerome? I mean, what do you think motivates her? What motivates her as an administrator, as a public employee? What does she want?
I think she's self-centered. She has, like I said earlier, her emotions don't run very deep. She can be a pretty cutthroat person. I think she's in my case, I thought she manipulated the whole deal, and her way of. Here's one thing: once you're written up by someone like Tracey, you can't leave your position. You can't go to another department and work for them within the city. You have to stay. That is good for 2 years. That write-up is good for 2 years. That you can't go anywhere else. So that's the first thing they do, is write you up, and then you're stuck, and you have to either quit or get fired because you're going to be beaten up.
Wow. Sounds like a pretty abysmal place to work, just in terms of the environment.
For an innocent person, which all the employees are, it's a great place to work. It's security. You got a job every day. You go and you do your job. But the inner workings of it, of how they can manipulate the situation and get rid of people and things like that, is just ungodly. It's just terrible.
So to summarize, you started in 2006, years before Tracey Jerome came on board, and you enjoyed your job.
Yeah, absolutely.
You enjoyed going to work. You raised over $5 million,
yeah.
which is many times what you were paid.
Right.
And after Tracey Jerome came on board, gradually you became miserable at work.
Yes.
Until you could not take it anymore.
Just can't take it.
And you were among several people who were let go of or forced out.
Yes.
So that you went from 12 to less than 6 people.
Eventually down to 1.
Eventually down to 1?
Well, yeah, the only guy saved was the maintenance guy.
Excuse me?
Yeah, I mean, they got rid of everybody except for one person.
The janitor.
The janitor.
They got rid of everybody at the El Paso Museum of History except for the janitor.
The head maintenance man.
What did he have that you all didn't?
I don't know.
PhD in...
they needed someone to maintain the building. That's the way I look at it.
Who did they replace? And contract employees.
They were replaced with, I believe, contract employees. I don't know that, but that's my estimation of why they got rid of the city employees. Why would you do that?
Right. And just to give some concluding context here, El Paso has a unique and rich history. One of the most interesting histories on the North American continent, right? We've got Native American culture going back to 15,000 BC. We have the Spanish Empire. We have the Republic of Mexico. We have the railroads. We've got gunfighters. We've got the Mexican Revolution. We have Chinese railroad workers, African Americans, Jews, Irish, Italians. We have this incredible, rich history. In fact, nobody has anything on us in terms of history and culture. And add to that our built environment. Mission churches going back to the 1600s, Victorian architecture, right through World War II, Trost and Trost, Gibson and Robertson, Babel Welch, and into the mid-century modern art and architecture of our city. It is bottomless, it is endless, and look at how the employees of our Museum of History have been treated. The institution under Tommy Gonzalez and especially Tracey Jerome was gutted, and the employees were run out of their jobs, and Lord knows what they were thinking, but I felt that it would be a good idea to interview Jim and just inform the media and public of what actually happened, because nobody else has. And today is tax day, April 15th. I thought it would be a good day to do it. And Jim, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of my organization, the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt, and also on behalf of all the taxpayers, we appreciate the job that you did very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service, even if the city didn't. And we hope to see you again.
All right.